This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories: passed, recalled, and then amended. Ugandan authorities stick to a controversial mobile transaction law, which some are worried could disrupt the cash flow system.
You're not only clamping on the mobile money system, you're also actually clamping on the businesses in other areas.
Concerns about a proposed new law in Tanzania which punishes people who question the government's official statistics. On day 2 of her Africa tour, the First Lady of the United States visits the Cape Coast Castle in Ghana. That's a site notorious in the history of the global slave trade. Also in the program, could music really be a universal language?
Together, oh blind old creeper, we gotta work together.
And the Kenyan rapper who is aiming for the top, regardless of the challenges he faces.
When writing my songs, I normally go in the studio, then me and my producer have a look at it, and I feel the beat through the vibrations from the speaker.
And in sports, Cameroon President Paul Biya insists his country will be ready to host next year's Africa Cup of Nations. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Now, if you are in Tanzania and you happen to criticize or question the accuracy of government statistics, you could be punished by up to 3 years in prison. That is if amendments to an act passed last month are implemented. Now, the move has raised concerns from various quarters, including the World Bank, which says we have shared our concerns with the Tanzanian authorities that the amendments, if implemented, could have serious impacts on the generation and use of the official and non-official statistics, which are vital foundation for the country's development. Well, the Attorney General said the changes were needed to enforce standards, but many say the changes are part of a broader government crackdown on criticism of its economic record. Well, joining us now is Jebra Kambole, a private advocate in Dar es Salaam, who has raised concerns about this new bill. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. Now, the amendments, the acts have been passed by Parliament. They are still yet to be implemented. Help us understand what exactly they entail.
Actually, how people take this amendment, it's actually affect on the issue of freedom of expression, on how people can contribute or make comments on the government statistics. So that's what we see on the freedom of expression and the violation of international human rights law.
But the government says this change is necessary, and to quote them, they say to stop the spread of disinformation. What is wrong with that?
It's wrong because the way the amendment has been done, on the way how it has been enforced in other laws, it takes away the issue of freedom of expression. That's why we are saying that if you need the accurate information, it's not necessarily to punish those who make some misinformation, but actually the focus should be that people should have that right of criticizing any accuracy of any information or statistic data. So people could not make any comments on the said information, and the requirement of permission to publish any information or to make any comments, and the criminalization of that information actually is violation of international covenant on civil and political rights, even the African Charter on Human and People's Rights.
So what do you think then will be the impact of this, especially with regard to accurate statistics?
The impact is people could not make any criticism on the government statistic. No one is ready to risk the prosecution, the going back into the courts and so on. No one is willing to do so. So we expect that no comments or analysis of the government official statistic data, and actually to affect our own development. It will affect the issue of corruption could increase, the wrong investment could be done. All those things will happen if the said law should remain as it is.
What is your opinion on all this? Why do you think the government is doing this? What are they afraid of, really?
Recent time, it's been the many opposition people or human rights activists. They've been commenting on some of the government data, and actually the government is not happy with those comments on how people are making it, how individuals and general citizens understand the data, need someone to make some analysis. So on those amendments actually affect how people will comment and how people will perceive the data. So actually, the effects is huge. The government is afraid on how people should comment on their data. So the government data will pass as they are. No one could make any comment. So that's what they are afraid on how people could make some comments on the said amendments.
All right, interesting times ahead there in Tanzania. Jebra Kambole, thanks for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's now take a quick look at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. Liberia's central bank says it did not lose more than $100 million in newly printed banknotes. This contradicts a statement made last month by the information minister, who said that 2 separate shipments of cash have gone missing over the last year. That's about 5% of the country's annual gross domestic product. It's the biggest political scandal to threaten President George Weah, who took office in January. A desperate scramble for food aid in Indonesia. The UN says 200,000 people need urgent help following last Friday's devastating earthquake and tsunami. Officials in the country say they've buried more than 500 victims and are struggling to bring aid to some of the remote areas affected. Now, the Zuma corruption inquiry continues. South Africa's finance minister has testified that the former president sacked him from his post in 2015 because he refused to approve deals that would profit the Gupta family. President Zuma was forced to resign in February over allegations that the Guptas benefited from government contracts and energy and transport deals during his presidency. Now, there's an issue that has had or could have an impact on you as a mobile user in Africa. Governments in East Africa have turned their domestic revenue collection efforts on mobile money transactions. What this means is that people have to dig deeper into their pockets when they transact money as a result of increased taxation. Now, in Kenya, mobile money users have started paying higher transaction fees following the increase in mobile money excise tax from 10% to 12%. Likewise, in Tanzania, there is a 10% excess duty for sending and withdrawing money through mobile money transfer. And just yesterday, the Ugandan parliament passed a bill that requires people to pay a tax of 0.5% on money sent on mobile. Our reporter Patience Atuhaire sent us this report from Kampala.
Another dramatic day in Parliament. The decision to reduce the tax from 1 to 0.5% was reached after 2 rounds of voting. A section of MPs had supported a motion to have it deleted from the bill altogether. But government has argued that it needs the revenue.
Well, still pressing their businesses down, but the country has to run. We need security, we need the roads, we need services. And this is one of the areas which we thought that we could, put a tax, a fee, a charge, so that we can get the money.
The law has been unpopular from the day it was passed 3 months ago. Some Ugandans took to the streets to protest against it.
For many Ugandans, mobile money is an alternative banking system, even for those in the farthest corners of the country. Many people use it not just for moving money, but also for stashing some away until they need it.
Mobile money transactions were valued at $1.5 billion in 2017, according to the central bank. That is 6% of GDP. It is a sector that employs and serves the most ordinary of Ugandans, but now businesses are shutting down.
We no longer get customers withdrawing large amount of money, and the 1% has also affected the commission we used to get. So we used to get 80% of the commission, but as per now we almost get 20%.
One telecom company has reported a 27% drop in the volume and value of mobile money transactions. Economists have criticized the amendment for suppressing a service that would have improved the economy.
You're not only clamping on the mobile money system, you're also actually clamping on the businesses in other areas. As we've said, somebody may be paying school fees, somebody may be running a restaurant, but this is how they pay their suppliers. So it's a disruption of so many underlying economic processes, which for me, if we let this system increase that efficiency, we would get faster growth in the economy, better jobs, and better opportunities to tax.
Ugandans look to mobile money as a cheap and safe way to move money. But the new tax reforms mean that many may have to look around for alternatives. Patience Atweire, BBC News, Kampala.
Well, Monday Akol Amazima is a political analyst and joins us from Kampala. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. Help us understand what impact this would have on households and even these financial institutions or even service providers.
Well, it's going to have such a huge impact because in the first place, it falls short of the principles of a good tax system. A good tax system, it must be acceptable. And acceptability comes with sensitization. There was no such sensitization to the people. And at the time it was brought in, the other issue that at the time it was brought in, it was a time when really government was on receiving end, whereby people thought that government overspent during the time they were amending the constitution to remove the age limit. So therefore now the people think that really the government is trying to do this deliberately so that they can recover the money that was spent. So this we are seeing very many people counting losses, especially those who are running mobile money units. And therefore we've seen some of them really going to be rendered jobless. So at this particular time, I can say yes, whatever the intention was, the good intentions, people are not looking at the good intentions, they're looking at a tax that has actually come to infringe only their meager resources, and also a tax that is coming to deny them to access the basic needs they need. But that also said, you see, in Africa, the problem has not always been people paying taxes, but it has always been where does the tax go? Because at the end of the day, you realize that yes, government is collecting taxes, but the next day you hear that money has disappeared in the coffers of government, there is an embezzlement case. So if such things can always be done away with, then I believe people will get used to paying taxes, however big or small the tax is.
So it's where the taxes go that is of huge concern. But I wonder, though, what leverage, stakeholders in, say, the mobile industry really do have, and whether government really consulted both the stakeholders and even the consumers.
No, there was no such consultation. Of course, that is why the tax itself is very, very unpopular. That even the purported consultation that was done within the members of parliament, you also see that was not inadequate because it was only the NRM caucus that sat to discuss this, to discuss the future and welfare of about 40 million people. So I believe that a good tax is one that is derived after wide consultation, looking at pros and cons. This particular tax of 0.5 in Uganda, Ugandans are looking at it as double taxation because ideally they pay money for the service of sending and receiving, and on that payment there is a tax. Now again, when you charge 0.5 on a person who is receiving, it is seen as some form of double taxation.
All right, Akol Amazima, thank you for your thoughts on this very important subject. Thank you. Thank you. Now, the U.S. First Lady Melania Trump has toured the historic Cape Coast Castle in Ghana, one of the many fortresses used during the slave trade. She's in the country as part of her first big solo visit to Africa. The BBC's Thomas Nardi has been following her for us.
The Cape Coast Castle is one of the many historical trading posts located along the West African coast. During the transatlantic slave trade, tens and thousands of enslaved Africans were held here under degrading and inhuman conditions before being shipped to the New World. Some of them were kidnapped and exchanged for items like alcohol and guns. The castle was originally used as a trading post for goods like gold and timber. In 2009, former U.S. President Barack Obama described the castle as a remnant of profound suffering and a reminder of the human capacity to commit great evil. The castle stands as a signifier of the starting point of African-American history. Mrs. Trump said she expected the visit to be very emotional. On her 4-country week-long tour of Africa, The First Lady is promoting her Be Best initiative, her official agenda designed to improve the well-being of children. Thomas Nadi, BBC News, Cape Coast in southern Ghana.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Sophie Ikenye. Still to come, we meet the Somali boxer who just wants to make her country proud. Peter will be here with all the details. I'm Sophie Ikenye and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top stories on this program: Ugandan parliament has passed a controversial bill that requires people to pay a tax of 0.5% on money sent on the mobile phones. Concerns about a proposed new law in Tanzania which would impose fines, at least 3 years in jail, or both on anyone who questions the accuracy of official figures. Let's now find out what's happening in the world of sport. Peter.
Many thanks, Sophie. And Cameroon President Paul Biya has insisted his country will be ready to host next year's Africa Cup of Nations. If you were watching this program yesterday, we told you the head of the Confederation of African Football was in the country to see if it would be ready. Well, the two met and Mr. Biya has given the assurance. Questions have been raised about whether Cameroon will have everything in place to host a successful event, especially in light of recent political unrest in the country. Next year's competition is set to be the first to feature 24 teams and hosted in June and July rather than earlier in the year. Ahmad has said CAF does not have any other hosts planned for the Nations Cup. Now, Champions League continues this evening across several European venues. Many African players will be involved in some of the matches. Italian side Napoli, seen here in training, are currently second in Serie A and have the likes of Senegalese defender Kalidou Koulibaly in their books. He will come up against Egypt's Mo Salah as well as his international teammate Sadio Mane when they take on Liverpool. And Koulibaly is relishing the prospect of defending against Mane.
C'est un joueur très... Je le connais très bien, on a été formés ensemble au FC Metz.
I know him very well. We were together at Metz. We kind of grew up together. He's a strong player. He works really hard to be at that level. He showed great stuff. He also scored in the Champions League final. He's a world-class player who has yet to show what he can really do, and he will show great things in the future. He's doing great at club level. I think he's a world-class player.
In one of the day's other games, Tottenham Hotspur are up against five-time winners Barcelona. Spurs will be without Ivory Coast defender Serge Aurier, who is out with a thigh strain. Also missing will be Christian Eriksen and Dele Alli. But ex-Egypt international and former Spurs striker Mido believes Barcelona are on a bad run now, and Spurs can take advantage of that.
Tough game. But we could see with La Liga that they're not at their best form. It's not impossible to beat them. So I think maybe Tottenham got a good chance.
Now to a young woman's inspirational story to achieve her boxing dream. Ramla Ali, who lives and trains in London, fled war-torn Somalia and wants to become her country's first ever Olympic boxer. But arguably, one of her biggest challenges has been persuading her own mother, who didn't want to be identified on camera, that she should be in the ring at all.
I wouldn't tell my parents. I just knew they wouldn't understand. They would tell me like it's a man's sport. They would say, you know, a Muslim girl wouldn't do something like this, and I knew that they would try and make me stop.
Gabar Muslim oo dheesh ma jiro aan dhahay. Ma jira aan dhahay aaw gabar Muslim dheeshi aan dhahay.
I competed in the national finals and I told my mum, oh, I'm just going for a jog, all the while going to compete nationally.
Way you do me to saying maxaa arkaa indhaheedu ma madow ah Ramla ishaada maxaa baay inta ma
I remember walking in from training and like everyone was there in the living room and I thought, what's going on here? We never sit down together as a family, it's mad. And then they were like, look, you need to stop. He said, I'm so proud of you, what you're doing is amazing and it breaks my heart that you've done it in secret for so long, and don't worry, I'm going to talk to your mum and I'm going to tell it it's actually a good thing and it's not a bad thing. I couldn't tell you how much I cried that day. Every day I'm getting messages from people saying, you're doing an incredible thing for our country, you're raising awareness for our country.
wixii iida jecel ana ma jeclahay haddii hataan ka celi ma ka yareyso laakiin wixii oo iida jeceshahay waan jeclahay ana maxaan samayn karaa.
It would be a great honour to represent Somalia at the Olympics, and purely because I think it would make my mum so proud, it would make my family proud, make the community proud, and for me that's just like a huge honour.
And I definitely wouldn't bet against her. Sophie, would you ever consider taking up boxing?
Absolutely not. But I think she's admirable, don't you think?
She's great. I mean, I got into the ring once, was so badly beaten that I never got back in.
I think it serves you right, Peter. Thanks for the sport. Thank you. Now, it is said that music is a universal language. So in Kenya, a musician who is both deaf and mute could be the first ever Kenyan deaf rapper. 28-year-old Douglas Munyendo, aka Lal Dagi, can sing, but relays his music through sign language. So how does he go with the beat in his local studio? And how is his music perceived? With this week marking the International Week of the Deaf, the BBC's Hassan Lali caught up with the rapper and filmed this report.
Thing together, oh blind or cripple, we gotta work together.
My songs are general songs for people and are mainly inspirational songs. So I use sign language and voiceovers and also subtitles for people who don't understand, therefore they can read and understand what I'm saying. I was born hearing, but then became deaf at the age of 5 after a long illness. I normally write my own ideas down. When writing my songs, I normally go in the studio, then me and my producer have a look at it, and I feel the beat through the vibrations from the speaker, whether it's trap beats or hip-hop, and then I'm able to create music. Marketing my music is a challenge because I sometimes go to TV stations and request them to broadcast my music, and they say it's okay, but they never play it. And when I follow up by making phone calls, they never pick up my calls. I sometimes have to go with an interpreter, and they're too expensive to hire. So I get really frustrated because of the communication barrier.
My lips silver, my hands stick tender, my feet kick, though my eardrums weak tender, my life flips.
My achievement so far in music is that I've performed for Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2015, and he was happy with what I was doing, and I got support to travel to South Africa to do my music video there to show people that indeed deaf people can.
I'm on the 5th gear, my eyes on the rear, time for these wipers to clear these tears, run faster than...
For me, I will continue singing until I die, because singing is my life.
It's quite an incredible young man there. Just goes to show that if you put your head into something, you can always make it. Now, before we go, a quick reminder of our top story today on Focus on Africa. There is controversy in Uganda as Parliament passes a bill that requires people to pay a tax of 0.5% on money sent on mobile phones. But some are worried it could disrupt the cash flow system. Likewise, in Tanzania, there's a 10% excise duty for sending and withdrawing money through mobile transfer. But don't forget, you can always catch up with all the latest news and current affairs on our website. That's bbc.com/Africa. And also, don't forget, you can also catch up with me on Twitter. I am @CKenya. But that's all for now from the team. Thank you for your company. Bye.